Hi, this is Dr. Larry Rosen from the Whole Child Center in Northern New Jersey. I'm back this week with another COVID coping tip. This week, I've been thinking a lot about optimism and hope. These are conversations I find that I've been having this week for some reason, which is interesting in a time of great uncertainty. These times really challenge our sense of hope, and I'm finding that in my conversations with families and patients and loved ones. I think of myself as an optimist. I've always been a glass half full kind of person. And I know that that's something that many people are struggling with right now. And I want to be clear, to me, optimism is not a sense that everything's going to always turn out to be okay. It's more a realistic sense of we hope, but there's no attachment to the outcome needing to be a certain way. Why does it matter? Interestingly, optimism is critically important and has been shown in study after study to be um, impactful on our emotional and physical health. We are less likely to get depressed if we have some hope and are optimistic, and to get sick. There was one interesting study I was reading about looking at the rate of respiratory infections in people who are optimistic versus controls and finding lower rates of respiratory infections, which would be pretty clear that that would be important these days. Um, and it's apparent that some people are more glass half full and some are more glass half empty. Um, I do think that some people are wired this way. I also think that some develop a positive mindset based on how they were brought up or certain life experiences, and I don't want to ignore that. I also think that optimism is something that can be taught and can be nurtured and cultivated, almost like exercise for your muscles. The more you practice, the more you can develop a sense of optimism at challenging times. So I've come up with a list of 5 practices that I find helpful and I found are helpful with some of my students and with families that I've worked with. The first two are things that I've covered in previous COVID coping tip videos. One is the practice of gratitude. So it might be something like every night when you go to sleep, listing 3 things that happened that day that you're grateful for. The other is compassion, and there are specific compassion mindfulness practices or meditations like loving kindness, wishing for yourself and for others. Maybe be happy, may we be healthy, may we be safe, and may we live with ease. Practices like that. Another is the practice of creativity. There's some interesting psychological studies looking at when people are caught up in creative practices in the flow of the present moment, it helps them do 2 things. One, to have a way to come back to the present moment and to focus on what is happening in the flow right in front of them. And that actually sets us up for a more hopeful mindset. Um, Also, if you're involved in longer term creative projects, that could be a music project or a dance or art or something around creating a curriculum, whatever it might be, this kind of thought for the future, things that you're working on for the future, do give you a more of a future forward mindset as well. Um, Additionally, any practice that brings us back to a sense of awareness of what's happening in the present moment, awareness of our state of mind and of our physical body, can help us to pay attention to those things and those people, really the environments or the situations where we feel good. So that if you notice that when you're practicing yoga or you're meditating or you're exercising, you feel more hopeful, that is something you want to do more of. And the more that you practice that, the more optimistic and hopeful you might feel. And finally, a practice of not attaching, non-attachment, which is really accepting the natural state of the impermanence of the world, that things don't last forever. And while at times that can be challenging in and of itself, the idea that the time we're living in right now, the quarantining and the stay at home and the limited social contact and living on screens, this is not going to last forever. and that there are practices that we can do that remind us of that. One simple thing is to get outside and look at the natural world. And if you look at the trees and the flowers and the grass and the things that are blooming and budding and noticing the changes, even compared to a week ago when I walk around my neighborhood and I notice the changes, or even a month ago, depending on where you live, you will notice changes. And if you notice that and concentrate on that, you can use that as a reminder that things do not always stay the same. And connecting to this positive sense of impermanence helps us to realize that we can be hopeful for a brighter future. And with that, I'd like to leave you with a poem by one of my favorite poets, Mary Oliver. This is Fall Song, and I think it really speaks to this sense of nature and change. And my wish for you is that it gives you some sense of hope, that we will see brighter days ahead. Another year gone, leaving everywhere its rich, spiced residues, vines, leaves, the uneaten fruits crumbling damply in the shadows, unmattering back from the particular island of this summer, this now. That now is nowhere except underfoot, mouldering in the black subterranean castle of unobservable mysteries, roots, and sealed seeds, and the wanderings of water. This I try to remember when time's measure painfully chafes. For instance, when autumn flares out at the last, boisterous and like us longing to stay, how everything lives, shifting from one bright vision to another, forever in these momentary pastures. Be well.